Hello and welcome back. I'm Nicole, a Cottage Witch, and this is my weekly sort of wrap-up of books, art, tarot. I haven't used a lot of tarot this week because I was away a bit for Christmas, which was fun but also exhausting and bananas. But I did get the Rose Season Tarot, which is a collage deck that I may do a walkthrough of one of these days. I have actually, for the first time in a long time, I have a variety of videos I want to do. Because, ooh, they're dropping things again. That's not unusual. But I had been doing just the weekly sort of summary of what I'd been up to for the last few months because I didn't really have the energy or inclination to do anything else, but I kind of wanted to do those. So that's what that was about. But now there are a couple of book tags. There's this tarot walkthrough potentially. There are a couple of other bookish sort of studying my DIY literature degree that was inspired by Candy over at the Great Literary Rabbit Hole. And yeah, so I wanted to do one about that and just a few different things. So yeah, I have a list. I may or may not get to those this week, but I do have a little bit of time off this week, which is nice because work is wild. You'd think it'd be slow at this time of year, and in some ways it is, but in some ways it very much isn't. Ooh, I like this one. I haven't even looked through this one yet, so I may do a walkthrough, first impression sort of thing. Maybe tomorrow? I don't know. One of these days. Scheduling things is not my forte at the moment. Also, when I went home for Christmas to Saskatchewan, there are a couple of shops there. One is Sask Made, which is all Saskatchewan made things, artwork, books, like pottery and soap and food, all sorts of food, meat that people hunt, or weird plants that you can't buy anywhere else. Like, it's just like fiddlehead ferns and things. I mean, you can buy fiddlehead ferns elsewhere, but you know, not maybe at the grocery store. So it's a fun little shop to go into, and I get their prairie berry tea because it's heavy on the Saskatoon berries, which are one of my all-time favorite things. And then they also have, there's a place called the Moose Jaw Fudge Factory in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Yes, that's a real place, where I went to high school. And I worked at the fudge factory for a couple of years, which is very dangerous because it's the best fudge I've ever had in my life. It's phenomenal. Anyway, they sell these little packaged things in Saskatoon as well. So they're delicious. And this is the only one that's left. I used to have 3, and now I'm down to 1. So that's that. And then I went right around the corner from this Sask Made store is a little bookshop called Westgate Books, and it's just changed ownership recently, and they have a store cat now on patrol, which is amazing. You know, you need somebody to keep up quality assurance and whatnot. He's an orange cat. He's very cute, but he's very, I don't know, he looks stoic. He doesn't mind people petting him, but he'll just wander around the store and, you know, keep an eye on things, supervise, you know. So I found a few books there. Lydia Chukovskaya wrote a book called Sofia Petrovna. Russian names are not my forte. I'm very sorry to anybody who actually can pronounce them properly. I'd never heard of this author, but I do like Russian literature. I'm really only familiar with the big names in Russian literature, you know, your Tolstoys and Dostoevskys and Solzhenitsyns and whatnot, Pushkin. So I haven't read, I think I've read one Russian woman, which is some kind of travesty. And this is a Soviet everywoman, a doctor's widow who works as a typist in a publishing house, and her beloved son is caught up in the maelstrom that is the Great Purge under the Soviet Union. And she joins a long line of women waiting outside the prosecutor's office, trying to find out every day what happened, you know, to all their family members. Anyway, this is what caught my attention. Confronted with a world that makes no moral sense, I feel like not a lot has changed in the last 100 years, Sofia Petrovna goes mad a madness which manifests itself in the delusions little different from the lies that those around her tell every day to protect themselves. And I'm reading, sort of, a book about mad women, The Mad Woman in the Attic. Theoretically, I'm buddy reading that with Candy, but we've been sidetracked. The train station is busy. Anyway, so really like the painting on the cover. That's also a tangent. Yeah, I don't know why I'd never heard of this one before, but it sounds interesting. This book by Atiq Rahimi is The Patience Stone. Khaled Hosseini blurbed it, and I really like his books a lot. He's also Afghan, and it's set, so her husband, this woman's husband, is in a coma, and there's all sorts of war and chaos around her, and while she's sitting beside her husband's body, she treats it as sort of a confessional and just spills out all of her thoughts and feelings about everything. And then he wakes up and has opinions about that. Apparently, it sounds like fairly potentially violent ones. Anyway, it's her first chance to speak without being censored, and so she does. And it's a little glimpse into the day-to-day life of people in Afghanistan, particularly women, which not going to be good at the moment. When was this written? Oh, 1 second. It was promoted by Penn. 2008. Okay. So it's been a little while, and this was after the American invasion. Quotes. Oh, those are quotes from the Quran that are older. Okay. All right. So that sounds fun. I think, well, maybe not fun, but, you know, interesting. Then I got a book that's for my literary DIY literature degree. Flann O'Brien's At Swim Two Birds is apparently an Irish classic. I do like a good Irish book. I don't know, the like per capita number of exceptional Irish novelists is, somebody's got to study that. They've got a gorgeous literary culture. And I've heard a lot about this one. James Joyce apparently liked him. And I don't really know much about it other than that. So it's on my TBR, and I have a copy now. And then so I read Nathaniel Hawthorne's The House of the Seven Gables this past year, like just a month ago? Yeah, November. And it's beautiful. I did kind of have to speed read through it because it was due back at the library, which I decided you can do with some books, maybe not Nathaniel Hawthorne. Like, I don't think he got his best look in with a speed read take. So I will reread that someday, because the writing is beautiful. And there were a lot of times I would stop and go, oh, that's beautiful, and then have to keep going, which wasn't my favorite. However, then at the bookstore, I found this Case Studies in Contemporary Criticism. It is The Scarlet Letter, which I read just out of high school, I think. And I remember it feeling at the time that it took longer than its length. Like, it slowed me right down reading it, which wasn't my favorite thing at the time. But I'm curious to think what I'd think about it more than, how many years later? 20? Yeah, 20-ish years later. Because I'm a completely different person now, as usually happens between your 20s and your 40s. So, but this has essays in the, so it's got the novel, but then it's got 5 critical essays from different perspectives, and I'd never heard of this series before, so I will give it a go. Mostly I got it for the essays, because I'll probably listen to the audiobook, because I just have so many books I want to read. So many books. And the ones where an audiobook exists, I tend to listen to the audiobook, because then I can get more in. And I'm a selfish reader that way. I want to read all the things, just constantly, obsessively. It's sometimes a tiny problem. And then I got a Norton Critical Edition for the first time ever. This is Shelley's poetry and prose. And I haven't read any of his prose. I've read some of his poetry. I need to read more. And he's one of the very few romantic poets that I don't have a Cambridge Companion for. So I saw this and thought, oh, I'll try a Norton Critical Edition, because I don't think I've tried one before, but I heard about them from Rachel over at Second Thoughts About the Mission, and they sound intriguing. So there are, I believe, also essays or commentary or something in here. I don't really know. It's a journey of discovery. And then I got the same series I got of, ooh, the cover is Christabel by Julia Margaret. I can't say that word. Albumen? Albumen. That's a strange word. Silver print. Sorry, I got distracted when I noticed it was Christabel, because that's one of my favorite unfinished Gothic poems. It's so good though. So this is the Norton Critical Edition of Jane Eyre, which I'm reading right now in French, which I'll get to in a second. But I sort of wanted the, here's the contents. So it's got the text of Jane Eyre, and then it's got some of her other early writings, some letters to one of her friends, some things from the Bronte sisters' diaries. So to provide a little context, I guess, and I've never read any of the letters. A bit from Elizabeth Gaskell's The Life of Charlotte Bronte, which I haven't read, and then some criticism. So Virginia Woolf wrote about Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and that's in here. Sandra M. Gilbert and Susan Gubar, who wrote The Mad Woman in the Attic, which I'm working on, have an essay in here, and then a few other people have bits and pieces of, it's the criticism section. It looks like it's excerpts usually from people's books or longer essays, but they took the parts that applied to Jane Eyre. And so, yeah, that'll be fun, I think. I'll probably get to that fairly soon. And then I got, the other shop in Saskatoon I went to is an art supply store. Because when you're in a different city, you just have to go to a different store and see what they've got that's maybe different than your art supply store, you know. So I got some colored pencils. Some are, they're both Caran d'Ache, but I got a couple of the Museum Aquarelle, I don't know how you're supposed to say that, and the Luminance. So the Museum Aquarelle are watercolor pencils. I was not as impressed with them as I was with the Inktense pencils, but they're nice. I like them. The Luminance, I also got to try. I think I probably still like the Derwent drawing pencils better, but it was nice to be able to just get a few open stock ones and just, you know, give them a whirl without having to get a whole set, because they're not cheap. And then for Christmas, I got a dual brush pen set. I haven't used a lot of these brush pens. And they're also not cheap, so I got this set for Christmas, and I will give it a go and see. I did a couple doodles so far with them, and they're fun. I'm not sure if they're my all-time favorite thing, but they're fun. And then I also got some compressed graphite, which is one of my favorite things. And this contraption, which I could have made if I was a handy person, which I am in some ways, but not in a woodworking way. This is for making your own paper, like mushing things up, old papers, fibers, whatever, plant matter, if you're so inclined, which I might be, in water, and then making a pulp, and then straining it with this to produce your own paper, which sounds fun. And it's kind of something I always wanted to do and just never have. I still don't actually know how to work it. Like, I have to watch a YouTube video. But anyway, I have it now. So sometime this winter, when I'm bored, I will do a thing. I don't know what I will do yet. And then I got, so I didn't actually get an official set of the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s, but they had open stock at this store. So I don't know if I can hold this up without them falling out, but I will give it a go. I made my own custom set of colors because I like all the muddy browns and the sort of dirty greens and oranges and stuff, which don't tend to end up. The sets that you buy of any colored product tend to start with like the primary colors and the bright sort of I don't know, pure colors, pure pigments, and then I also, if I'm doing landscapey stuff, want the muddier ones as well. And so yes, I got a bunch of those. They're so much fun. It's like being a little kid again, because they're very much like Fancy Pants crayons, but also they're water soluble. They're a delight. I'm not good at using them yet. I mean, I'm not sure I'm good at using most things yet, but I'm definitely not good at using them. I've had them for a week, but they're super fun. And the last thing I got for Christmas was this book, which is Helen Frankenthaler, Painting Without Rules. So she is one of the women of the abstract expressionist movement out of New York in the 50s, 60s-ish, post-war New York environment. And she, this is the inside, just the inside cover. She didn't invent soak staining exactly, but she made it sort of more mainstream. Anyway, this is her in her studio. And I love the abstract expressionists, but particularly women. And she is one of these people. So I've read a book about Joan Mitchell. I want to read more about Elaine de Kooning. And then this is about Helen Frankenthaler. So it's got some essays or excerpts from correspondence, influences, basically just some stuff about her and her work. And then it's got a bunch of plates in the back. Oh, just about hit myself in the head, which also wouldn't be terribly out of character. Ooh, they're little sculpture things. I didn't know she did that. See, learning new things already. I don't know what that is, but okie dokie. It's got that smell of a slightly plasticky, I don't know, I think it was wrapped in plastic or something. Yeah, it was. Shrink wrapped. Ooh, this is fun. Driving fast. I think this is a rainy day or something. Anyway, I haven't read it yet, but I will do that eventually. I'm backwards. There is like 3 stacks of what I want to read in this coming year for my DIY literature degree and language learning and etc. So I'll get to it eventually. I make no guarantees as to timeline because I want to read too many things. And then, okay, the reading I got done this week was, did I finish anything? I finished one thing and worked my way. No, I finished 2 things. I finished How to Kill a Witch, The Patriarchy's Guide to Silencing Women by Zoe, I can't read my own writing, Venditozzi and Claire Mitchell. I will write more clearly next time, but that was really interesting. I didn't have any idea what it was about, but the title caught my attention. And basically, they go through a lot of the Scottish witch hunts and witch trials, talk about where everything went wrong for mostly women in that case, not entirely women, but mostly, and try and draw connections between the different things that may have led to these women being killed, in addition to people's belief in actual witchcraft, which most of these women, perhaps all of them, were not witches. They were killed for a variety of reasons, including religious paranoia, but also bigotry and greed and all sorts of things. So that was an interesting book. And then, of course, they do tie it a bit to the modern day and try and use it as a sort of, not quite cautionary tale, but like, maybe let's not go back to those days tale. You know, we can leave that sort of patriarchy in the past where it belongs. None of this bringing the stuff back nonsense. And then I was hoping to finish this by the end of the year, but I don't think I will. Well, the end of the year is tomorrow, so I most certainly won't. This is Camille Daud's Meursault contre-enquête, the Meursault investigation, which is the response by an Algerian author who won a big literary award in France this year. Goncourt, I think, for his newest book, Ori, which I also want to read, but it's a little expensive at the moment, so I will find a used copy. Anyway, it's a response to Albert Camus' L'étranger, The Stranger. And I read The Stranger earlier this year and really enjoyed it. And so now I'm working on this. And my French is mediocre. I can get through this. I can understand what's happening. I miss a ton of stuff. So I'm looking stuff up sometimes. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm just, you know, into the story. But sometimes a word will come up enough times where I'll be like, yeah, I better look that one up. And then every now and again, I do the sort of, what's it called, Google Translate photo thing where you know, line the camera up with your book and take a photo, or just hold the camera open to a certain page and it translates the whole page. And I'm not saying that's, you know, the highest quality of all possible translations, but it does highlight what I'm still unable to get in French literature. So that's a project for next year, Exhibit A. I'm also reading Jane Eyre still. I am so close to done though. I'm listening to the audiobook of this. I have the physical book, which I'll read again someday, because this is my third or fourth time through Jane Eyre. I've lost count. And I'll read it again. I love this book. So I'm very near the end. What's his name? I'm blanking on the name. Not Rochester. The guy, the family she goes and lives with afterwards. The two sisters and the one guy who wants her to marry him and go be a missionary in India. I'm through all that bit, and he's now left for India, and she's going off to be a school teacher. I think a school teacher, yeah. So that's about where I am. So I'm very close to the end. I might finish that today, or if not today, then tomorrow. So I'm so close, so close. This I was also hoping to finish by the end of the year, which I might not, but I'm like 70% the way through. So I've got this copy with tabs and notes and whatnot of, this is Ulysses by James Joyce, by the way, which I realized I didn't say. I'm listening to the audiobook because it's a very musical book, and that's one of my favorite things about it. It's so musical. The lyricism, but also just the musicality of the rhythms of how things flow is beautiful, and I love it. And so I'm yeah, about just over 2/3 the way through. The trouble with this book is, unlike other big books, like War and Peace is a long book, but it's not a hard book. The language is not difficult. Trying to remember all the Russian names is difficult, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's just long. So it's intimidating because it's long. This is long and difficult. So it's rewarding and I'm enjoying it, but it does take all my concentration. Like usually with other audiobooks, except for the ones in French, English audiobooks, I listen to them while I'm grocery shopping or going for a walk or doing the dishes or whatever, you know, all the stuff that needs livening up throughout the day. And I really enjoy doing that. I cannot do that with this book. It needs like focused one-on-one attention here, or I just miss. I mean, I still miss a lot because there's enough where you could read it 50 times through and still get more out of it, I expect. I'm on the second time through. Well, second and a bit. The first about quarter, I've probably read 4 times now. Well, more than that. Because there's a podcast called Rejoice that I've talked about before that is excellent. And this guy loves the book so much and goes through all the allusions page by page, line by line. But he only made it about a quarter of the way through before he passed away. So I've listened to that and then read it and listened to it and read it and then read it again. So the first quarter I'm more familiar with, but now I'm in going into the last third, and I'm in a little bit of uncharted, well, not entirely uncharted, because I have read it once before, but there's just so much. There's so much. It's a tiny bit overwhelming sometimes, but fascinating. And then I started this at the airport, which is an excellent airport book. This is States of Grace by Stephen Graham Jones. He's known mostly for his horror books, but he does write literary fiction as well. And I think he has argued in the past that his latest books are sort of literary horror, like he wants to write both at the same time and not have to like split his writing personalities and styles. And this is flash fiction. So they're all of the short stories are like 1 page, sometimes 1 paragraph, and that's it. Sometimes they're like 3 pages. Yeah, that one's 3 pages. That's probably the longest. Most of them are about a page. The first one, which is my favorite so far, is this one, In the Beginning. And that's it. So you can screenshot that if you want to read it. It will take, 20 seconds. It's beautiful. So I'm really enjoying that. And And then the one book I finished was Don't Be Afraid, Gringo, A Honduran Woman Speaks from the Heart. This is the story of Elvia Alvarado, translated and edited by Medea Benjamin. So it's a memoir that this American journalist sort of transcribed, I think, by a Honduran woman she's a labor activist. She's indigenous to Honduras, and she is a campesino, which is sort of a peasant farmer, as I understand it. Campesina. And so she is a campesino organizer, and she's led dangerous land recovery actions in an effort to enforce the national land reform laws. So they have these laws in Honduras that are supposed to mean that when a corporation or a super rich landowner, they're like 5 people who own most of the land, or 5 companies. United Fruit is one of them, the banana people. They own most of the land in Honduras. They don't use all of that land all of the time. So there's this law that it was supposed to ensure that if they're not using it, that these peasant farmers can then farm on it, which seems reasonable. They're going hungry, their children need to eat, they've got a malnourishment in children problem, like that seems like a reasonable solution, you would think. Some of these large landowners and multinational corporations, like United Fruit is American, it's an American multinational, are just astonishingly violent towards these peasant farmers, who don't tend to be violent, at least the way she tells the story here. However, I wish there was an update to this book, because it starts, so there's a little preamble which goes over some of the history of the area and their interactions with the US in the 70s and into about 1980, 81, 82, somewhere in there. From when Nixon was president and the Iran-Contra thing exploded, because the Contras were fighting the Sandinistas, I probably didn't get that word right, in Nicaragua, which I've got another book, memoir by a Nicaraguan activist, which I've got to read, because the Americans have an unreasonable terror of socialism. I realize this was still during the Cold War. It started still during the Cold War. It's no longer, but they're still unreasonably scared of socialism and don't actually know what that means. Not every American, I realize, but like a lot of them, and the media and the politicians, like hear the word socialist and lose their collective, whatever brain cells they possess, disperse at the mention of the word socialism. So she's not a communist. She addresses that in the book. There are democratic socialist sort of tendencies, I think, that her organization has, because it's a labor union, basically. And I'm a big fan of unions, so, you know, always will be. Anyway, it goes through her life. The first half is basically the story of her life, her childhood, and growing up into adulthood in Honduras. And then it gets into her work, the struggle to recover the land, her trying to, it started with the church educating people, and then the church stopped educating people because they were like, oh, no, you're not supposed to think too closely about why people are poor. You're supposed to be sorry that people are poor, but you're not supposed to interrogate why you're poor. You're just supposed to accept being poor. So the church, both Catholic and evangelicals, withdrew their funding when people were like, but why are we poor? And could we possibly arrange to not be? And so there are a bunch of labor unions now in Honduras. And this book was published in 87. So it covers the bulk of the 80s. And I'm so curious as to what has happened since then. I think not very much progress in this regard, because they're still outrageously poor. And as I understand it, these companies still own most of the land. So I think not much has improved for them, but I'd still be curious for like an updated edition. I actually Googled Elvira Alvarado, and I couldn't find any articles of her like death or anything, like news articles. She would be, I think, in her 80s by now, or thereabouts. So she may still be alive and working or doing whatever she's doing, I don't know. But they decided when they published this book, part of the preface pointed out that people had argued that it was dangerous for her to publish this book, which it probably was. But in the end, the publishers and the author, this activist, and the Medea Benjamin, the journalist, all decided that it was safer for her if they published the book, because then everybody would know her story. So if they killed her, which was a distinct possibility, and may still be for all I know, there would be more international sort of awareness. So maybe they'd be less hesitant to do that. I don't know if I'm not monetized on YouTube. I don't know if YouTube has any qualms about my saying things like that. They may do, but it's a really good book. She's hilarious. She has nothing complimentary to say about Reagan. She thinks he was an idiot. I think she said he was the stupidest person she'd heard of. I don't think she'd heard about Trump at that point. Can't imagine she'd be complimentary about him. So anyway, oh, and there are like 15 military bases from the US in Honduras. Why does the US need 15 military bases in Honduras? Like, surely one is sufficient. It's a little country. 15 seems overkill. Also, one seems like, what are you doing in their country, dudes? Mostly they were fighting the Sandinistas, or whatever the group was called, in Nicaragua. Because communism is scary. I mean, I have issues with communism. Socialism is, I'm more okay with that. Largely okay with that in a lot of ways, in fact. Anyway, I got this book because the title made me chuckle, and she did make me laugh a few times. I mean, there are points that are heartbreaking, because they're living in such desperate conditions, and it's day-to-day survival, and they have so extremely few options in their lives. But yeah, it's a remarkable book. A remarkable book is what I was trying to say, and I'm so glad I read it. Okay, art things. I did these before I left. These are just on paper with, so I was experimenting with, what did I use for these? Oh yeah, acrylic ink. I'd forgotten about that, because the last time I used it was before I left for Christmas, and like 15 years worth of events have happened since then. Anyhow, I did these two with acrylic ink and then put oil pastels over top, and discovered that the oil pastels I've got, the Light Wish, actually almost completely dry. I'd always thought oil pastels just didn't dry almost at all. They'll harden up a little bit by the next morning, but they were almost completely dry. I was astonished. So I will wait longer in the future before I varnish them, because I didn't know that would happen. Good learning experience. Anyway, these were just play. They were experiments with different ways of holding the oil pastel that wasn't just like a pencil. And so this one was like twisting it around in different ways and just seeing what different textures you can get. It's a little repetitive in that regard, but I like some of the ones down here especially. And I like the side, so the horizontal landscaping movement. This was more fun to make and is more sort of my style, I think. But I realized afterwards it's very squat, like it's all up and down vertical strokes almost. So it looks very, so I will have to experiment further. Sometimes it's fun to do something and then I have my nose right in it, and then you gotta like put it across the room and have a look at it and go, oh, yeah, okay. I'll try something different next time. And then what else did I do? I took a few sketchbooks to Saskatoon, which this was funny. I started with gouache and then I used Inktense pencils on it and didn't like it because the gouache activates more easily than the Inktense pencils, and so it just turns into muddiness. However, then I used oil pastels on it and it was all quite fun. And looks like, you know, menacing dragon eyes or something. I don't know. Bunch of scribbles. Other just experiments with layering things, etc. Yeah, I'm not done with this, but this was more experiments with. This was this acrylic ink? Yeah, it was. That's that sketchbook. And then the other watercolor sketchbook I did, what did I last show? Oh yeah, that thing. So I did just some different experiments with doodling on top of these more acrylic ink backgrounds just to see how things layered in different color combinations and so forth, and different types of mark making. And so they're just doodly experiments. Oh, these are the Neocolor 2s. I did a little swatch of those, which are so much fun. I'm not sure the water activation thing is my favorite thing about them. It's a fun quirk, I guess, a fun feature, but it's not my favorite thing. And it works better on some of them than on other colors. Like the darker colors, obviously, you get more payoff. And then I did just some, this is this an Inktense? I think this is an Inktense crayon. Just doodling. Oh yeah, I don't know where it went, but I got a graphite crayon that's water soluble, which does this sort of thing. And then this is these, what are they called again? Oh yeah, the dual brush pens by Tombow. That's these. And then this was the water soluble graphite. And then, did I do anything else in here? No. I need to get a new watercolor sketchbook. I'll just go to the art supply store again. Tragic. And then, oh yeah, I was watching Downton Abbey with my mom. And I'm not the biggest Downton Abbey fan ever, but it's fun. It's kind of fun. I don't mind it. So anyway, I was doodling people's faces, or trying to, badly, as they were, you know, moving around. These two I kind of like. That's Edith and Cora, I think. And then this is the slightly grouchy butler who's retiring. And I was trying to get the drape of the fabric, and the neckline's all wrong, but I like this bit down here. That's one of the dresses. Oh, those are hideous. Yeah, so those are some of my experiments and play for the week. I think that's everything. Well, that seems like enough. I've been going on for a while. Sorry. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.